Today in Rome, President Trump's special envoy to the Middle East is meeting with Iranian negotiators in search of a nuclear deal. The stakes raised even higher by new reporting that Israel is preparing to strike Iranian nuclear sites if these talks don't work out. Tehran responded by threatening to move its nuclear material to secret sites, making it harder for international monitors to know whether Iran is building a nuclear weapon or not. I want to bring in someone who has worked with the Obama White House to negotiate the previous nuclear deal with Iran. Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor and MSNBC political contributor. So, Ben, President Trump suggests a deal is imminent. We're hearing something completely different from Iran's supreme leader, who says he's doubtful these talks will lead to anything. He also insists that they're not going to stop enriching uranium. You know how painstaking these kinds of negotiations are. What do you make of what is being said on both sides publicly?
Well, it feels to me, Chris, like everybody is posturing for some kind of end game for these negotiations. Israel is threatening military action to try to compel Iran or the U.S. maybe to push harder for Iranian concessions. Iran is making clear their red lines around enrichment. And the U.S. is mainly making clear its interest in reaching a deal. Now, there's a number of things that are challenging here, Chris. I mean, the first is they're trying to conduct what is a pretty complicated set of negotiations around pretty technical issues really quickly, within a period of weeks. And I hasten to add, Chris, that if Trump hadn't pulled out of the nuclear deal that Obama negotiated, we wouldn't be in this situation. But put that aside, I think the bottom line here is that if the Trump administration is willing to accept an existing Iranian enrichment capability, if they can continue to operate some of their centrifuges, continue to have some domestic enrichment capability, they can get a deal. And it's going to be a deal that looks somewhat like the Obama deal. If they insist on the complete destruction of any enrichment capability, I think it's very unlikely that the Iranians would accept that. It's a matter of pride. It's a matter of their ultimate hedge to want to maintain some kind of nuclear capability on their soil. So that's really, I think, where this trade space is. And we've seen mixed messages from the Trump administration and Steve Witkoff on this. At times, they've suggested they could live with that if they shipped all their nuclear material out of the country and they enriched at a much lower level than they currently do. But at other times, they've kind of spoken to their more hardline base and saying, no, we want to see all enrichment gone. I think that's ultimately where this is going to end up, is whether Trump can accept a deal that is more like Obama's and that they maintain a minimal capability with very stringent verification.
I mean, is it not a deal? I mean, well, look, it's not a deal until it's a deal. But in advance of that, Ben, are there things that we can be looking for to determine if at least progress is being made?
I think that, you will see the messaging coming out of the governments about whether they're expressing optimism. But I also think with the Iranians, at times they feel compelled to make it look like they're willing to walk away from the table. So it's going to be hard to read too much into the public statements because there's some interest on both sides in taking kind of harder lines publicly. Frankly, I wish that there was less public talk about this than there is. It kind of makes it harder when you're taking negotiating positions in public, as both sides have. But ultimately, I think the thing to look for, again, Chris, is if the Trump administration, if Witkoff indicates that they're willing to accept some domestic enrichment capability for Iran, that would tell me that we're very close to a deal. If they walk out of these meetings and say, we continue to insist that essentially the Iranian nuclear program be dismantled and they have none of that capability, then I think we might be headed for a world of no deal. I think that the Israeli threats, in a strange way, may actually increase Trump's willingness to accept something, because what Trump doesn't want, and frankly what the Gulf Arab states that he just visited don't want, is a war in the Middle East, another war in the Middle East, which is what would happen if Israel hit those nuclear sites. So, we'll see how flexible they're going to be here in the coming days.
I want to ask you also about the other big story of the day, Trump threatening a new 50% tariff on the European Union. The EU is already trying to figure out how to support Ukraine and punish Russia without the help of the United States. What are the potential consequences of this kind of economic clash with the transatlantic alliance?
It just couldn't be coming at a worse time, Chris. I mean, I talked to a lot of Europeans, and the reality is they already feel completely abandoned by Trump on Ukraine. They've not supported, despite their need to kind of put on a brave face in public. They would not have taken this approach to Putin in the negotiations, where you essentially try to negotiate the end of the war with Putin directly. They feel like their own security is at stake there. They did not appreciate J.D. Vance flying to Europe and kind of endorsing the far right party, or at least suggesting that the Europeans needed to embrace and create space for their own far right parties. So this comes on top of what has already been a rupture between the U.S. And Europe on a number of pretty existential issues for the Europeans. And my concern is that, look, for U.S. interests, in the long run, obviously, I think we're stronger with allies. We're stronger in standing up to Putin. We're stronger in dealing with global issues. But also, it's going to incentivize over time the Europeans to look to China, to look to India, to look away from the United States for its own trading relationships, its own supply chains. So, yes, while the Europeans may try to do something to avoid these more severe tariffs coming into force, I think you're going to start to see them hedge against the over-dependence on the United States, not just on security, but on trade as well. And in the long run, I think that would be very bad for the U.S. economy, and very good for countries like China that offer an alternative source of trade and supply chains.
Ben Rhodes, always good to see you. Have a good holiday weekend. Appreciate it.